approve the, is there a motion to approve May 10th meeting?
So moved.
minutes? All right, we have a motion
Second?
and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. And we're in information only on number 2. Does any of my colleagues want some information on that?
No, but could I make a comment, please?
Absolutely.
This afternoon, I'm doing a ribbon cutting on a new housing facility for veterans. And I'm hoping somebody could get me some information about our program I could take so that, okay, Cindy? I'd appreciate it if you could get it to me by 1 o'clock. Because I think it's a large complex and I want to be able to get as many vets in there as possible, as soon as possible. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for everything you do with their vets. We're on item number 3 through 6, and we have cards on number 3, so we'll go with item number 3. Would we? We have the chief.
Good morning, Chairman Nowakowski, members of the subcommittee. I'm Mike Kurtenbach, and with me today is Stacy Osborne-Fry. And what we'll be doing is providing you a little bit of information, some general information on the Neighborhood Block Watch Oversight Committee, and then there's 2 specific questions that we'll be addressing. So the Neighborhood Block Watch Oversight Committee was established back by ordinance in January of 1994 to solicit, evaluate, and recommend to the City Council appropriate proposals to expend Block Watch grant funds. Now, what the ordinance calls for is that the committee be comprised of no fewer than 10 and no more than 20 members. Now, of those 20 members, 1 is the police chief or designee, 1 is the Block Watch Advisory Board president or designee, and then the other 18 members are appointed by the mayor and council, 2 each. Now, the 2 specific issues that I'll be addressing today have to do with, first, the appointment of officers, and second is membership terms. So with regard to the appointment of officers, the ordinance as currently written prescribes that the mayor will appoint the chair, and then the other members of the committee can appoint the vice chair or additional officers as needed. Now, the term for the chair of those officers is for 1 year, and they all expire contemporaneously together for that 1 year. With regard to membership terms, all members are appointed for 2-year terms, and they're staggered so that we don't have all 18 that expire on the same year. 9 would expire 1 year and 9 would expire the following year. Each one of those members can have their term extended for another 2 years for a total of 4 years. Those are the specific items that I was looking to address this morning, and Ms. Osborne-Fry and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for my colleagues? If not, we have Candace, if she's here. Come on down. Right up to the mic.
Good morning. I would like to recommend that this committee approve the suggested bylaw recommendations to extend the opportunity for us to continue serving. We have had 2 particular individuals on the committee that have been serving beyond their appointed expirations, and as a matter of legalities, my concern is that there's an unwritten policy that we may continue to serve until our replacements have been appointed. And this, allowing for additional terms to be appointed, would eliminate that gray area, and we would be in a legal position where we could continue to serve.
Any comments on that?
I think I'm the one that told you that.
Correct.
Because that's kind of how I've always operated. I have a very difficult time finding people to serve on that committee. It's quite a few meetings, and grading the grants takes a very long time, and it's a big commitment. And right now I have 2 vacancies, and I am searching for someone to replace them with difficulty. So I am the one that said, well, stay put until I can find your replacement. So I personally don't have a problem with that. But I think extending the term for a council person should be that decision, because as council people change, I think it's important that they have the opportunity to appoint people that they want on that committee that will help serve the block watchers. So
Correct. The
sorry
recommendation
if I
is,
misinformed you, but I've just kind of done
what-
it.
the recommendation to amend the bylaws is simply to allow for additional terms that are still subject to this committee and the city council approving that additional term.
Thank you.
So, Chief, if there's a council member that happens to have difficulty trying to find a replacement, what happens or what can happen, or what's your suggestion?
Mr. Chairman, what I'll say simply is we want to make sure that this committee is as efficient as it can be, meeting the guidelines that are established. It's a very important job to grade all of these applications and ensure that the money is distributed appropriately in accordance with the bylaws and the guidelines. So it's a tough position. I understand that it puts you in. Our position as a police department is that we want to support the effort that allows us to fill those seats by qualified members that will follow the rules as established by you, so we can get those monies out to the Block Watch organizations.
And having 20 members, if we maybe cut it down, and I don't think we can make that decision now, but if we're having problems trying to get 2 members from each council district, maybe 1 member?
Well,
Might
Mr.
be a
Chairman, there was an
suggestion.
amendment to the ordinance some time ago with regard to quorum, and
Yeah.
I think Stacy can address that.
Yes, so back in, Councilman Nowakowski, public safety members, back in 2012, we went to city council and made it so that the membership was between 10 and 20 members, and that a quorum would be for sitting members. So it's one more than half of the sitting members. So we don't have to base it on the 20,
I'd forgotten about that.
right? Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes, and the Block Watch funding we went to the voters and asked them to support us
Yes,
creating
ma'am.
this program and funding it. Is there anything that we promised to the voters about oversight that we ought to be cognizant of when we make this decision? I like to deliver on to the extent we can.
So in the ordinances, I have actually a binder of all the ordinances that are associated with this. Back in, I think it was 1992, it was a proposition that was voted in, and a portion of those funds that went to the police department then formed the Block Watch Advisory, or the Neighborhood Block Watch Program and the grant funding. Initially, it was 1.2 million that is distributed on an annual basis, and the police department is the administrator of the program. So we're the ones that advise the Neighborhood Block Watch Oversight Committee.
Like when we did Proposition 104, we promised citizen oversight of the spending. Was there any specific promises we made, or was it just too long ago we don't?
I don't believe there was a citizen oversight. It was creating the board so that the board would be the oversight of who got the money. And they're a recommending body only. So those recommendations come to you, and then they go to full council for the grant awards.
Candace, you actually have 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. On the original ordinance that was voted on in 1993, the Block Watch Oversight Committee and the neighborhood funding is 0.1%. The entire sales tax was 0.1%. Out of that, 0.05 is for the neighborhood Block Watch grants. 75% of that additional sales tax revenue was for the police department to strengthen neighborhoods, gang enforcement or reduction. So that money in the first year was projected to be $900,000. So each year, the sales tax revenue has funded both the Block Watch grants and the police department in some substantial monies. I believe it's like $9 million, like I said, the first year, and we have increased our Block Watch grant money. So I'd like to see some investigation as to where all of these funds are going and what's happening. I mean, we've eliminated our community programs coordinators. We've reduced some of the services from our precincts, and I think some of this funds should have been designated to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we maybe get a report on where the money actually goes to and where the funds are? And then we actually have one more card. Should we call that
Yeah.
person up? Alexander, come on down.
I helped write the order.
Thank you, Councilman Noskowski, and thank you, council members. I am a member of the, my name's Alexander Malkoon, 245 East Rose Lane in Phoenix, member of the Block Watch Grant Committee. And I want to fully support what was just shared with you. I am the current vice chair and have been past chair of the Alhambra Village Planning Committee for the past 5 years and know the challenges that we have. And I've been on this committee for about 5 years. I will call it penance. Because because serving on there, and I've had this conversation with Councilman DeCiccio, is a challenge, as you mentioned, Councilwoman Williams. The grading of these is a tremendous amount of dedication and effort. The beauty of this this committee is that you do get a great sense, and I would encourage you to promote this for anyone who's interested in community involvement, to understand all the neighborhood groups in the city. Because I had no idea when I got on this committee how many wonderful groups make an effort every year to come back and help work with the police department in ensuring that their neighborhoods, their property values, the crime statistics, everything is going in the right direction. I also want to compliment city staff because they have been a tremendous asset, and I really sincerely mean that, because there's no way you can stay on that committee. I'm here intentionally because I'm concerned that, as difficult as it is sometimes to staff these committees, I was alarmed at the number of individuals with institutional knowledge, like Candace and our current chairperson, and another individual who have resigned. I don't know if Candace has, but certainly I was alarmed because it leaves me, and I've hidden behind these great individuals because they have really taken the lead. And I want to say that we do need to be real careful here, because we are dealing with funds, we are dealing with institutional knowledge. It's very critical in understanding the neighborhood groups, the scoring mechanism, so that we don't just have a scoring mechanism that is willy-nilly. It takes an understanding of each of the categories that are necessary to fund these grants. And so if there's anything that we can do as a committee to assist the city and assist you, and even if it's a conversation, in identifying solid individuals, perhaps they might come from some of our other committees like village planning committees. You might want to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alexander. And any other questions or comments?
I was thinking, we got a great presentation about sales tax and just the sales tax not being where we had hoped, and the dips in the economy. And it might be good that some of the citizens commissions, including the Block Watch Advisory, get that information as well, just to see what we had projected and what actually happened with the economy, so that we can talk about. I think it was useful information for me, and I think it was from Jeff Barton that would be helpful for.
Councilwoman Gallego, the board does get a report quarterly on the status of the fund for the Block Watch.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, then that may be
Absolutely.
necessary. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
Thank you. I was here when we wrote the original proposition. I think I was mayor in '94 when we amended that.
So now we know who to blame, huh?
Yep, now you know the thing. When you look at the history and what has evolved, I really have to thank all the block watchers and staff. I know that it is challenging for you. We like to work in tandem. Sometimes it's very interesting on how we get there down the path, but the fund was set up to support police, because at that time, that's when Block Watch was new. And we were a firm believer that people should become involved, help police patrol their neighborhoods, do whatever they can to make them safer, because they're right there, they know the problem, and it doesn't mean that police has to come every time if there's an easier way to handle some of the crime. And a lot of it has been lighting, graffiti. I mean, the amount of graffiti that has been painted because Block Watch has got a grant is just absolutely amazing. That's why we are recognized as such a clean city. And these grants really, really benefit. I know they put up gates, they've done lights, they've done cleanups, just about anything you can think of. So I think it's really important that we continue down this path. I think we will always have a few challenges along the way. I personally look for people to be on this committee. Having served on it when I wasn't on the council, I know what it's like to be on the firing line in that committee. So I think we need to keep it as it is, but I would really like to see, I think a very valid point was made. If no one has any historical knowledge on that committee, it's like starting in square one, which also puts a burden on you, because there are guidelines that they have to stick to, and not always do they want to. And I think it's important that you have the support within the committee to make sure they stay on the right path. Those are tax dollars. They need to be spent as we promised. And although it wasn't called an oversight committee, it really was people from the neighborhoods being involved and recognizing one another, the strength they have, and to provide resources so that it would benefit the entire community and the police. So I would like to have this come back, perhaps, as Councilwoman has said, give us an update, give us some information on where these grant monies go. What are the list, what's the hot ones that they want? Are there some things on that list that they now need that's not covered? I mean, times change, needs change. Sometimes we solve a problem and a new one's created. So I would like your input as well as this committee to come up and let us know what's going on and their needs. And if everything's status quo and it's all great, that's better yet. But I suspect there may be some changes along the line. And when we do that, I would like to have us consider if we can't find a replacement, if a person can be extended for one more term.
Any other comments? So if you can bring that back to us, and just really want to thank all the members. It's a hard task. It's a hard committee to be overseeing all the grants and making sure that every block watch gets their fair share. And some people feel that they need more than others, and it's tough. So thank you for all those individuals. They're all volunteers also. The other thing is we as council members need to do a better job maybe out there recruiting it. We need maybe a kick behind sometimes to make sure that we're replacing people when we should replace them and actually rotate them out. I know that one of the concerns was having a chair longer than a year or two, up to 4 years, right? So even rotating the leadership there is good to build more leadership within the committee. So all those ideas, we can maybe come back and come up with some suggestions in the near future.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. And now we're on item number 4.
Well, the chief just gets to stay and take more punishment.
Yeah. We're talking about the update on hiring police officers. So one of the things that brought this about is that in our city council meetings, our budget hearings and all that, we've been hearing the importance of hiring more police officers, but at the same time, we've been hearing all the different amenities that are out there, the parks, the senior centers and all that. So we really want to sit down and figure out what it is, what is 2 officers per 1,000 or 2.5 per 1,000, and how much it actually costs us to have officers out there, and that this way we can, as council members, we can actually weigh out the pluses and the minuses when it comes to hiring more police officers.
Chairman Nomikowski and members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to present you with this information. We are very grateful for the support we've received, which is allowing us to hire at a rate that we haven't seen in a number of years. And specifically, what Mr. Barton and I strive to do today is provide you information regarding with what it would look like if we staffed at a ratio of 2.5 officers per 1,000. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Chairman Nowakowski, members of the subcommittee, as you well know, the budget that you tentatively adopted just a few days ago, last week, includes the hiring of over 259 additional police officers over the next fiscal year. That will take us to our sustainable goal of 3,125 police officers. At that point in time, we'll be at roughly 2.0 officers per 1,000. That's a field standpoint. So our field officer count will be at about 2.0 officers per 1,000 City of Phoenix residents. To go to 2.5, I just want to walk you through what that takes to get there. So based on the population number that we're using for this particular calculation, which again, you can grab a variety of different population numbers, we all know that. But you have to add about 837 additional officers to get to that 2.5 number. At a cost, a new officer cost, fully loaded, is about $109,000. That takes about $91 million just for the officer costs. On top of that officer cost, those officers also have personal equipment. Each officer has about $12,000 worth of personal equipment that would also go with that officer. On top of that, we need to add about 418 cars. That's a 2-to-1 ratio on the cars. We don't do a 1-for-1. So those additional cars will be about $24 million. So there you see our increase for vehicles and equipment at about $34 million. So the total direct cost, the cost associated with just the officers and the equipment that they need, as well as their cars, you're talking about $125 million. What that number does not include, it does not include additional money for the response time or for the additional support staff that those officers would need, such as communications operators, crime scene staff, staff in the courtrooms, staff in the prosecutor's office, additional staff in facilities and public works, because you're adding an additional 418 vehicles to the fleet. That would take additional staffing as well. So again, the $125 million number that we're talking about is on the low end. So I know the other question that you asked, Councilman, was what would it take from a budget perspective if we were to have to cut that if we weren't talking about adding new revenue. So if you look at $125 million, based on the budget that we're talking about for fiscal year 17-18 of $1.278 billion, if we were to cut that from across the entire organization, that looks like a 10% cut. But obviously, if we're talking about adding to police, you probably wouldn't be cutting police or public safety, criminal justice. So at that point, what you'd be cutting is about 30% for all the departments that are remaining. Because our $1.3 billion budget, if you will, if you take public safety and criminal justice out, that's about $900 million removed from that 1.3. That leaves you with about $400 million. So you'd be basically cutting about 30% of what's left. So to put it in even greater terms, $125 million is equal to essentially the Parks and Library Department combined. So that's essentially what you would need to do to get $125 million if revenue were not on the table.
Now, Jeff, one of the things that you talked about, the increase in vehicles and equipment, but more arrests, more tickets, the courts across the street would increase also, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. This does not include any of the support staff. Increased jail costs, increased staff for courtrooms, increased staff for law, prosecutors, response that you would need for communications in the police department to support that many additional officers. So there's a lot of expense that's not reflected, not covered in that $125 million.
Any comments? Vice Mayor?
So Jeff, thank you for providing these numbers. In this conversation, as you stated, there's additional support staff. Is it possible to show us what the cost for the additional support staff will be? Because what's the total cost when we hire new officers? What's the total cost to the system in a very holistic way? So, because in you stating this, as we are hiring more officers, are we going to be able to support the current officers that we're hiring?
So the number of officers that we plan to hire, that 259, to take us back to our 3,125, the existing staff that we have, the number of authorized staff that we have in the police department from a support staff standpoint, as well as all of our supporting functions from court to law and everything else, we think there's enough staff in place for that currently now. Going beyond that, going to this 2.5 ratio, We could probably come up with a number for you, but it would take some time because we'd have to actually get with all of those departments and try and figure out if there's a way to use metrics to get to what would be the impact of adding that many additional police officers. It wouldn't be an exact science, but we'd have to kind of feel our way through it. We could probably come up with something if it was something you needed. But this is an annual expense, 125 million just for that. But we're talking about adding to that with all these other expenditures.
Mr. Chairman, in addition to the things that the budget director is talking about, to add 837 officers, you're also talking about real estate costs. Because the current precincts could not house 837 more bodies and still function efficiently. When you look at when they were built, the size, the square footage, it's just not physically or logistically something that you would do. So you would need either additional precincts, larger precincts, and that's part of the cost. It'd be an estimate. We couldn't be accurate because the deployment strategy would be up to the chief, but there's additional numbers that would need to complement and go with what he's saying.
Any other comments? Councilmember Williams?
Jeff, does that include, I mean, that appears to be new hires.
That is correct, Councilwoman.
Does it include the advancements? You would have to have additional sergeants, lieutenants, commanders, et cetera.
No, this just assume, the way we've costed this out is 837 additional officers. What the police department would do with that 837, they would internally figure out what their ratios are going to be. We're using a $109,000 average, assuming that those are all new police officers. We all know that the average cost when you blend all sworn police officers is about $156,000. So if you wanted more sergeants, more lieutenants, things like that, then it would push that number up from $91 million.
And when you said that the current staffing levels you think are correct, does that mean they're budgeted but not necessarily filled?
Correct. So right now, what we're planning for in next year's budget is 3,125 officers. I believe what's actually filled currently actually out on the streets is about 2,800. Plus the police department has about 115 people, I believe, currently in the academy. So they're sitting at about 2,900 officers or potential officers out on the street. Over the next year, we're going to get to 3,125.
And the additional staff is the same?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So the next step would be, I would like to see if there's some type of way of coming up with $125 million and other resources that are out there without cutting that 30% from all our different departments. So if there has to be some type of a creative way, if there's a tax or so, I think what I like to do is actually look at all possibilities. So when we actually have this debate, or we're actually talking about hiring more officers, that all my colleagues know what we're actually talking about, either cutting 30% of all departments or looking at a different option. And I like to look at those different options so you can come back to us and say, here's a way we can come up with $125 million. And I think that my other colleagues are saying it's much more than $125 million.
Right, I was just gonna go
Right.
So
there.
if you come up maybe with the estimate, real costs would be.
So Councilman Nowakowski, we can work on what we think those ancillary costs would be in addition to that above. In the absence of budget reductions or service level cuts,
Right.
what we'd be looking at are more than likely sales tax increases of some nature to support that level of staffing.
And could you give the percentage of?
We could.
And then if you can come back and tell us what that would be.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any other questions or any other?
We can do a real estate calculation too based on square foot cost. So we can give you a number based on how the chief would deploy.
Because I think we really need to have a debate. If we're going to really be out there advocating for more police officers, then we need to have all the information in front of us, what it's going to take, and what tools we have out there to actually generate that 125 million plus, right? Any other questions or?
I have another question. Um, and I don't have the budget in front of me. Oh, maybe I do. When I'm looking for the budget, um, when when you calculated this number, this includes all insurance, pension, everything.
Correct. The $91 million that we're reflecting for the cost of those 837 officers includes not just the salaries, but it is the fully loaded cost. So it's all the fringe benefits, retirement, pension, all that stuff that goes in with those officers.
Okay. And one of my questions is, by having more officers, will then the overtime go down?
That's an age-old question that I've been chasing for years. In the perfect world, Councilwoman Pastor, there should be, in my mind, an inverse relationship between the number of officers that you have filled and the amount of overtime you expend. However, in the 12 years that I've been in BNR, I have never seen that actually happen.
And Vice Mayor, if I may, let me address that as well. If we have more officers out on the street, they're responding to more calls for service, they're conducting more investigations, they're writing more tickets, effecting more arrests. There's more corresponding court time that comes with that as well. So just by the very nature, we can, and I agree with Jeff, reduce overtime for minimum staffing and whatnot out in patrol, but understand that if they're doing more work, they're generating more work for the courts as well.
Correct. And so that's why I think it's very important to have a bigger picture of what the total cost will be, because I don't think the total cost will be 125 million. I think it will be more. And what does that look like? What's the impact on the system?
We can, like I said, we can calculate all of the ancillary costs or come up with a range, more than likely, not a definitive number, more likely a range. As far as the overtime, I don't know that there's an accurate way for us to forecast or project how much overtime these individuals would consume. And I don't know that the chief or the police department could do that either. So again, that's just something that's going to be in addition to. Typically what ends up happening in the police department now, when they overexpend in overtime, it's being offset with vacancies. So they've got a number of vacancies that would offset them going over budget and overtime. Because it should be kind of an in-lieu situation. I don't have this officer filled, so I'm going to spend overtime, so that savings is covering the cost of that overtime.
Okay. All right.
Any other comments or questions? All right. All right, we have, this is item number 4, Alexander. Come on down.
Malkoon, thank you, Councilman Nowakowski. I figured since I was down here on the other issue, I might as well take advantage of my time. I do have one question, and I know that and my only knowledge of the police department is obviously my participation in some of the citywide events and neighborhood groups and committees. So this may be out of sorts, but I do have a question. In looking at crime statistics for the city of Phoenix, I've lived here my whole life, and in many of those crime statistics are lower today per capita, not just in total. So if you had 123 murders in 2012 and you had 242 in 1991, I'm just throwing some numbers out there. In almost every category, the statistics per capita are lower today than they were going all the way back to crime statistics in Phoenix back to 1985 in many cases, whether it's rape, assault, what have you. And so my question is, the required officers at 2.5 per thousand residents, and the budget is 2.0 per thousand residents. What was our budgeted and required at the time that statistics showed a much higher crime rate? My point is that if we had similar numbers at that time, clearly there's been a significant improvement in police methodology in reducing crime that may have offset the need or the requirement for the additional funding. And I mention this only as of concern for the other budgets in the city's departments, whether it's libraries or or Parks and Recreation. So my question is simply in relation to the per capita crime statistics today versus historical, given the number of officers per capita today versus historical. And I just would like the staff to consider that information, and I'd like to know make sure that council members are aware of that. So, thank you.
I'm not sure if you have those numbers or when crime was up and what was the officer per thousand at that time?
Chairman Nowakowski, members of the committee, I don't have that information right now. That is certainly something that we can research. And those are very valuable numbers and important data sets. What I also think is important for us to consider is that we can't measure crime that didn't occur because we had officers out on the street. And hopefully that makes sense when I frame that.
Any other?
There's no doubt we've been working more efficiently, and you've had a lot of innovations in the department, too.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Well, I can tell you, I had the experience of flying in our police helicopter, and it's just amazing of what goes on in the city of Phoenix and how fast you can get from one side to the next. And even having, it's like having little angels that are protecting you up above, and even looking into that and providing maybe more helicopters to protect the men and women in uniform when they're at sites and where they can actually see those individuals running through an alley or so, and you can identify them from a helicopter or somebody fleeing from a crime scene, that you can actually create roadblocks and all that. So even looking into that in the future would be something good to have, either purchasing helicopters or leasing them, or what's the best practices in other cities. Thank you. Alrighty, we're on next item. And this item came about with some phone calls of property owners, small businesses that we were out there, especially in the Maryville area, recruiting individuals to sign up, and then after a year, the contract's out, and then they have to renew, and then they're confused, and they're saying, well, we just called the police, we gave them authorization, but they said we don't have authorization. So there's a little bit of confusion, and we're just wondering if there's a way to extend it or not extend it, or how do we work with those small businesses?
So, good morning, Chairman Nowakowski and members of the subcommittee. I am Marshall Franklin, Director of our Community Affairs Division here in our department, and with me at the table is Commander Tom Van Dorn, who oversees our community relations in our Public Affairs Bureau, recently promoted and has vast experience coming from our patrol division. So very appropriate to speak to this issue. So we're here to provide you with information regarding the authority to arrest procedures when businesses have an authority to arrest form on file with our department. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commander Van Dorn.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, currently right now, your Phoenix police officers receive their authority during non-business hours or at vacant residential structures throughout the city from either the actual owner or a designated lawful representative of the property. During business hours, obviously, we're required to go ahead and make contact and take it from there. As of right now, the Phoenix Police Department has approximately 4,259 authority to arrest on file, and currently approximately 2,597 of those are up for renewal, and or we currently do have the 1-year mark. The 1-year mark was kind of established, in all honesty, to ensure that your officers are in fact receiving the proper authority to go ahead and enforce any trespassing statutes on a yearly basis. When it comes to businesses and or they have designated a lawful rep, such as a manager or a store employee, you see a lot of turnover in the private sector and those types of things. So it just remains vitally important from both an enforceable and a prosecutorial standpoint that we are staying as up to date as we possibly can to ensure that we have been granted authority by the correct individuals. Currently, the system has been upgraded to automatically generate an email. As it gets closer to the 1-year renewal form, it is sent to whoever filled out the initial form to begin with to see if any changes do need to be made or if the form does need to be updated. And that's currently how we operate for right now. It's not that we probably could not look at a 2-year term, but again, the system has kind of been placed to ensure that we are out there with actual lawful authority to be able to make that arrest and enforce those statutes. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Vice Mayor?
So, understanding that, I sometimes get a letter about renewal, membership renewal or something, and says, if you like to make any changes or you like an address change, please send this card back. If I don't send the card back, then my membership continues. I know this is not membership, but what I'm trying to get at is, if somebody doesn't say there hasn't been a change in ownership or there hasn't been a change in occupancy, I guess, then why don't we automatically renew it?
Well, Chairman, Vice Mayor Pastor, I think that's definitely something that we can look into to whether or not, if they don't reply. But again, your officers just need to ensure that they have received the proper authority. So I think we just need to work with our community action teams that if the email is generating the renewal form and we have not received notification, then we probably still need to make attempts to reach out to ensure that we still have the proper authority on file for your officers.
Okay, so you triggered me again. Can I?
Oh, absolutely.
Other than email notification, how else do we reach out to that owner, I guess, of that property?
Like I said, with the number, Chairman, Vice Mayor, with the number that we do have on file, again, it was important for us to create at least some sort of an automated generating system. Without that, your community action officers in the precincts would literally have to go through each one of those forms for the entire city to see when that renewal period is. So we do receive a printout or a list at the precinct level for the community action teams. They do review it, compare that with what has physically come in to ensure that it has been renewed. If we generated one and we have not heard back, then your community action officers are physically picking up the phone and attempting to contact the people that have been listed on the form.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman?
To help us find the right balance between making sure the city doesn't have liability for arresting someone where we didn't have the authority and making sure that we make this process as easy as possible for businesses to help us. Could you just give us an example of a hypothetical situation where we might have arrested someone without an authority to arrest, and what would be the implication to the city?
You bet. Chairman, Councilwoman Gallego. Obviously, with the authority to arrest, again, it's only enforceable during non-business hours. And it's obviously used in a wide variety of situations for officers that are out there driving around and identifying specific locations. So let's say we have a business owner, but that business owner has since changed hands, but we have the authority to arrest on file. In essence, that original authority was granted by the owner at the time. So when the ownership then changed hands, we don't know whether or not that new owner agreed with the policies or the procedures or the mindset of the previous owner. As such, that authority would no longer be valid. So if an officer was acting, not saying that through the court system, it would be up to the courts to decide that, was the officer still acting in good faith when the arrest was made? But potentially that authority did disappear the minute that the ownership changed hands.
I guess I was just trying to think through when it might happen, though, because when I was thinking through most of the hypothetical situations where we might arrest someone and then a business owner would say, I wish you hadn't, I couldn't come up with too many examples.
Chairman Nowakowski and Councilwoman, one that Commander Van Dorn and I were talking about is I have heard there are some faith communities that believe that allowing individuals outside of normal church business hours or worship hours ought to be afforded the opportunity to maybe find shelter or comfort at that church. And so there are some faith communities that have not wanted to pursue an authority to arrest. So you could have a situation potentially there where we receive a call for service and we respond and there's something going on that we would arrest that individual, that, as the commander said, the court system would determine the merits of it, but you could have a potential community member, citizen, upset because we were on their property outside of hours arresting someone that they believed should be allowed to be on their premises doing whatever that may be. I don't know if that helps you.
That does help very
Okay,
much, because I was
thank
thinking
you.
through, if you broke the window in my store, I would see it unlikely that
Right.
someone would press charges
Right.
against the city
Right.
for arresting. But that was very helpful.
Vice Mayor?
But would they have authority to rest on file? I mean, for trespassing. If a faith community believes that it's a place of worship, a place of comfort, would they have that type of trespassing?
No ownership, right?
To Chairman Nokowski and Vice Mayor Pastor, to the point, it could be potentially that you change leadership in a church.
Okay.
And the leadership has a different perspective than a prior leadership. The prior leadership said, yes, we would like to have an authority to arrest on file. You receive new church leadership, or there's a change in direction or within that faith community, that worship center, if you will. Those individuals or that new individual may decide that, no, we don't want the police department coming on our property and arresting, if you will. So that is why Commander Van Dorn referenced the fact that there's a benefit for us at least once a year to be able to determine that, in fact, a particular entity would want to maintain the authority to arrest.
Yeah, I was just curious,
Sure.
only because
Sure.
I was just curious.
Any other questions, Councilwoman?
There's concern about wanting to serve businesses and property owners as they hope to be served, but on the liability side, has anyone ever pressed charges against us for arresting with an expired authority to arrest?
Chairman, Councilwoman Gallego, I would probably have to refer you to the law department with respect to claims for false arrest and those types of things.
I think for several of us on the council, our instinct is that a longer period might be okay, but I want to make sure that I appropriately understand the risk. But it seems like we might be able to do like a 2-year renewal cycle, or at least it would be worth looking into, but I wouldn't want.
Pilot.
I would like to better understand the issue and how other jurisdictions. I certainly wouldn't want to incur liability.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we'll check to the extent possible. So part of the sensitivity of this issue that has taken place in some other jurisdictions. So there's this some level of tension in communities between the police and the people that they're serving. So you have a number of incidents or interactions where the police are clearly operating within the color of law and doing what you want them to do. There are some communities where there is a feeling that that goes too far. And so if you don't have accurate documents on record giving you authority, one of the potential issues is someone's going to say, well, you profiled me. You don't have authority to be here. You saw me. You're bothering me. It's just that kind of fallout. The police have maximum protection when they clearly have authority to do what they're doing, because a lot of activity takes place after hours. And so you have citizens that call the police and say legitimately, hey, I saw someone suspicious on that church property or wherever. It's just dicey. It's not a right or wrong, but those are the kinds of issues that can snowball at the community relations level. Well, why did you come and take that person? Or who gave you authority to go on that premises? And we say, well, we have authority on file, and it turns out, well, we didn't have authority on file. It just adds to that conflict that we're always trying to improve upon. Doesn't mean don't do it, but it's just out there.
So the last time someone met with our office about it was just like someone had broken the window and they were like, well, of course we would want you to arrest. But I guess it would be helpful to understand when this is most relevant. Is it primarily cases with homelessness, or what are, because I don't think we should, again, be arresting everyone who is homeless.
I have
That's
an
not
example that happened last year during the summertime. Is a small business, all of a sudden about 2:00 in the morning, cars started parking there and partying and having a good time. It was private property. The police weren't able to go on there unless they seen something illegally happening. And the owner the next day, Monday morning, called us up saying, why did we allow this to happen? And there was nothing on file of trespassing or are not allowing these individuals to do that. One person was actually owned a little tattoo shop in the facility. So when the police officers did come by, they said, "Well, I own this place." He was leasing it. He didn't own the property. The landlord wanted the people off the property. So just things like that that could happen. That was just one example. So I think it's much more than just breaking a window. It's actually hanging out and doing stuff that the landowner doesn't want, from homelessness to all kinds of stuff. I'm not sure if there's other examples or.
So
Sorry, go ahead,
I
Vice
think-
Mayor.
I think it's our responsibility when we are asking business owners to fill out a form and turn in the form to the department. I feel it's our responsibility to keep very accurate and very good communication to our customer, and do what we need to do to make sure everything is up to date and paperwork that is needed in order to protect everybody that is involved. And so we have to figure out, or somehow, I don't know if this is data-based, where when an officer is at that property, that they go in and they see that there's that the form is on there, and that authority to arrest, and that there's a form there, and that then they look at the date and then they see, okay, it's expired. Now we're in a different situation. I don't know how that piece happens.
Yeah, and Chairman, Vice Mayor Pastor, that is currently how it does. So when we receive the form back, the community action officers electronically enter that into Police Point, which is available citywide to any officer out in the police car. So they have access to the entire database, and they're able to look that up to see after business hours whether or not authority has been granted to the officer to be able to enforce it.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right, if you can bring it back to us and find out 2 years or best practices are out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And being good stewards of our tax dollars, we are going to go over the budget of each department in public safety. Thank you so much. Police?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'm Jill Salaya from the Police Department, and I'm going to give you a budget overview or actuals through April. Our current budget is $611 million, and through the end of April, we spent $497 million, and we're at 81% of our budget through 83% of the fiscal year. So we are under budget right now. Our month-to-month comparisons, it's similar to last month. April, we're pretty much on track to what we were spending last year, and our total funds are 5% higher than last year, but a lot of that's due to the additional hiring that we are doing right now. Our top 10 expenditures continue to be personal service items. Some of the variances are sworn career enhancement. A lot of that is due to a lot of retirements that we've had and promotions. And then also our sick leave payouts are less than what they were last year, and that's due to sworn personnel not choosing to get payouts for their sick leave. And then our revenues collected through the end of April. Our special events is higher than what we did in the previous year, and that is due to our department providing more services to more special events, and our hourly rate is higher than what we were charging last year. And then also for our court awards, we have deposited more money into that account due to increased operational needs for police equipment, aircraft maintenance, and building improvements. And with that, I'm done with the presentation. Are there any questions?
I have a question about the hiring.
Okay.
Are we meeting our goals, our fiscal year goals, by meeting the hiring, by the meeting the hiring budget or allocation, is what I'm trying to say.
So
What I mean is, if 600,000 was allocated to hire new officers, and we're at the end of the fiscal year right now, and we have, say, 200 left. We haven't hired, we have 200 left, 200,000 left, and we were unable to hire those police officers by the end of the fiscal year. Guess what I'm trying to go at is, then does that money roll over into the new fiscal year for hiring, or does it get swiped?
So Chairman Nowakowski and Vice Mayor Pastor, the money does not get swept.
Okay, swept.
That won't happen. But what I can tell you, I'm very proud to report, we have met our hiring goals.
Okay.
We meet with BNR regularly. We make sure that we have benchmarks. And in fact, we're going to close out this fiscal year at hiring 305.
Okay. I was just curious. Only because you were under, so I was like, oh, where is it?
Any other questions? Councilmember Williams?
On jail services, the number is less. Is that because of diversion programs? Do you have any idea why we're not booking people, or what the reason is, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, for jail services, we have seen a decrease on a monthly basis of the bookings. And I believe that's due to less officers on the street now that we're increasing, but we have a lot of OITs out there. And so I'm assuming that it is going to increase as we hire and these OITs become, are able to perform on their own. I have
an
seen
OIT?
Oh, officer in training.
Okay.
I'm sorry. But we have seen in the last couple months that the monthly bills have been going up. But in the previous months when we had less officers on the street, it was lower.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we'll go to fire.
Good morning, Councilman Nowakowski and members of the committee. I'm Ken Lake. I'll be presenting for the fire department's budget. So at the 10th month, or 83% of the year, we are tracking right at 79% spent. So we're just slightly under what's been allocated. And looking at the 10-month expenditures, really nothing really pops out. You can see in the variance column we're either above or below. This month we're actually below. But again, going down to the bottom, the overall total, we're at 2.6 over last year, which is, pretty much right on where we expected to be. Top 10 expenditures are largely salaries and benefits. The only thing that really continues to stand out for us is our constant manning of the trucks is actually down, which we do believe is related to the amount of firefighters we have in the field now. So we're down a little bit in that column. Other than that, the rest of the items for the expenditures are pretty much tracking exactly where we thought. And then looking at revenues, most of these are cost recovery, so we expect to be right on target. We are slightly down in the ambulance transports, and that has to do with the amount of calls for service that we are experiencing right now. So it's slightly down, but in this month, I understand, which would be reported next month, we had a larger than normal amount of revenues collected, so we'll close that gap a little bit. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Williams?
Do you have purchases for new equipment in here?
Yes, and that's actually in the motor vehicles line item, and that was purchased much earlier this year. It was, and I don't know the exact number, but I believe around 10 ambulances, a couple fire response vehicles as well.
Because I know, I think you're having a problem with ladder trucks.
Oh, yes, well, it's largely because of the age of a lot of them.
I know, so I'm just wondering is that what repairs are for, or are those like?
Yes, so the motor vehicle expenses or the repairs, equipment management charges, you can see they're slightly up in expenditures, and generally that's indicative of the fleet or maintaining the fleet. The engines, we have replaced about 17 to 20 of them recently, but we have a running stock of about 67, so as they get older, we see them going into the shop more. Ladder trucks, we've retractored the front end, but we're still pulling around. In some cases, the other parts of the trucks are wearing out, so.
I took a recent visit to one of the stations who happened to have the ladder truck there, but when I was told what area it covered, I mean, it was half the city.
Yeah.
I thought, that's pretty dangerous, really.
Yeah, there's very few of those in comparison with the other trucks. So, a specialty truck and obviously fairly expensive as well. So.
Thank you.
Court.
Good morning, Chairman Nowakowski, members of the subcommittee. I'm Will Gonzalez with the Municipal Court. As you can see, in our budget, we're at 78.52, so we're right on budget. And as we go to our monthly expenditures, you will see the variance from the prior year. We're only at 2.40, so we're right on track for that. And as for our cumulative expenditures, mostly consistently are going to be employee costs, as you can see. And then for revenues collected, as you can see, we're still down from the previous year, but that's the trend, and we've spoken about that every month as for the trend nationally on that as well. So if you have any questions.
Any comments?
I always enjoy the update on the compliance assistance program. How is that
Well,
going?
we're over 8 million now on that, and continues to be a very successful program. We have just, with the assistance of Channel 11, promoted a spot in Spanish for our Spanish viewers on Channel 11. So it's been, we're receiving and seeing more individuals coming into the court. We saw a big jump during tax season. It looked like individuals were taking advantage of their refunds and clearing up their prior responsibilities and obligations to the court and to the community, getting their license back. And so it continues to be a viable program, and it continues to expand. Other jurisdictions are inquiring, and other jurisdictions are looking at the same program and implementing it. So really, it's the Phoenix model that is now you're seeing in Tucson and Glendale and some other jurisdictions.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Good job.
And we have a card on Steve.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Steve Peck. I am a citizen of Phoenix. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my friend Shane Forbes at the last subcommittee meeting, and I'm sorry that I was not able to be there personally to present the plan to save millions of dollars by relocating central booking to the Phoenix City Courthouse. I know that you all received the supplemental materials that I sent to your office detailing how moving central booking and transforming the way the city processes misdemeanor prisoners could save millions of dollars. As I am sure you are aware, between when Shane presented last month and today, the city of Mesa voted to stop using Maricopa County for detaining their prisoners. As a result, MCSO announced that they would respond by increasing the cost to other valley agencies for prisoner bookings. In other words, a plan to reduce prisoner costs is more important now than ever before. Finally, I know that the city is facing a massive budget challenge next year. I hope that this committee will give Chief Williams and our staff the opportunity to present innovative ways to reduce costs without reducing the level of service that the Phoenix Police Department provides to the citizens of Phoenix. I hope we can all agree that, excuse me, that we cannot afford to starve the department of the resources it needs to keep Phoenix safe. There are good ideas out there, and I hope that you will take the time to ask for and consider ways to constantly innovate and improve. Again, I appreciate all of you taking the time to listen. I hope that in the future you will encourage all stakeholders to present ideas to you that will ensure public safety is a high priority for Phoenix.
Thank you so much, Steve. And next, any comments on the budget? Alrighty, thank you so much. Now we have call to the public, and we have several cards and they're actually giving up time. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 minutes to president of the of plea. Come on up, Ken. Time's up.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Once again, for the record, my name is Ken Crane. I'm a Phoenix police officer and serve as the president of Phoenix Police, Phoenix Law Enforcement Association. Two topics I wanted to discuss is, number one is the staffing and a little bit about the central booking issue. I'll try to get through this really quickly. There is a 2015 FBI UCR data report that's out there on staffing for police agencies. And that report says that cities of 500,000 or more are currently staffing at a rate of 2.37 per thousand. And that's 33 cities nationally that fall within that category of 500,000 or more. This falls in line with police current position. We've been touting all along that we should be up at around about 2.5 per thousand. We got that data off of the 10 largest cities, which we are a part of, as you know, and a 2003 IACP study. As you all know, Phoenix just surpassed Philadelphia. We are now fifth place, fifth largest city in the nation. We also got the maybe coveted or not so coveted title, depending on how you look on it, as the fastest growing city in the nation. So some comparisons real quick, just to make you think a little bit, between Phoenix and Philadelphia, the city we just passed. Population, Philly's at about 1.5 million, we're at about 1.6 million. Police staffing, one of the numbers being put out on the Philly PD's website is they staff at 6,600 officers. We're at 2,800. The ratio for Philly is 4.2 officers per thousand. We're right now about 1.8 per thousand. Philly polices an area of 140 square miles. We police 530 square miles. So the staffing goal we're trying to achieve of 3,125 total sworn, again, a lot of you know this, but I just want to reiterate it for the record. It's 260 fewer than we had in 2008. So, excuse me, using that logic, I guess we would have to assume that in 9 years the city didn't really grow or expand much, our population didn't grow, but we know that's not true because we're the fastest growing city in the nation, just passed Philly and took fifth place. In 08, we were at about 3,385, just under 3,400 officers. So we saw the cost comparisons, 125 million. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's relative in terms of big cities. If you look at our total annual budget, 125 million is 3% of the total annual budget. To the issue of buildings and infrastructure, yeah, you got to have the buildings and infrastructure. We get that. But all the cops you're hiring are not going into precincts. Roughly a third of the police force is out in precincts. So right now we got 2,800. We got about 1,000 out there in patrol. If we were to hire up to 4,000, theoretically, some quick math tells us that if we divide that by 3, it's on the high end it's 1,500. And you divide that by 8 precincts, that would be 187 bodies per precinct. It's not going to break the bank or make us have to necessarily run out and buy a ton of new buildings. So it is doable. We remain steadfast in our position that we need to find the money. You know, we are a big player. We are a big city. We need to find the money to staff our public safety infrastructure appropriately. So that's the point we wanted to make on the staffing. With regard to, I know there's been some back and forth on central booking issues, whether we should move central booking down to the basement of the city court just across the street here. Me and some of my fellow officers at plea made it a point to go over there to see firsthand what the layout is, to talk to the people down there. We were there for an hour and a half and talked to several officers down there because we wanted to see, is this feasible, is it realistic? Some things we found out that the people over there that work there, the officers, in their opinion, it is completely not feasible in their opinion to move central booking down to the basement of the court building. That building is a real pretty building, but it's a horrible design. It's who builds buildings in the shape of a half circle? I mean, you do it when you want it to look pretty. But it's a horrible design for efficiency. When you get down in that basement, you see for yourself just how bad it is. So when we talk to these guys, ironically, 2 of the people staffed down there at Judicial Process Detail have previously worked central booking. Now, we talked to one of them, but in what he told us, he goes, we've seen both sides. We are both of the opinion it will not work trying to combine these operations down here. It just will not work. There's a lot of issues those guys have during the day. When court's going on, they can have up to 40 prisoners and 8 holding cells just going to city court. Those are in custodies. They cannot be combined with what we call non-in custodies. In other words, people that have not been booked into the jail system yet. They have to keep them separate. The Sally Port, the driveway to get down in there is extremely narrow with extremely limited parking down there. It's all they can do to get their 3 transport vans in there, and we looked, it's a tight fit. So to have officers from across the city coming in day out, bringing it would be a nightmare. So the other thing I want to touch on, civilianization detention officers. I think one of the issues we're running into from what people we're talking to, is to civilianize our central booking, which we've been trying to do for years. And I don't have exact numbers, so forgive me on that, but my understanding is we're starting out on the pay scale for civilian detention officers somewhere around maybe 20 or so an hour, and then neighboring agencies, Tempe Mesa, whoever, or some of them are paying between 23 and 25 an hour. So we can get people in, get them trained, but then they go to where the grass is greener and the money's better. So we may have to look at what we're going to pay detention officers to get it civilianized. Even at 25 an hour, it's still going to be a lot cheaper than putting cops down there. So I just throw that out there for your edification. I'll close with this. I would encourage all of you on the subcommittee here, make some time to go across the street and go see the basement for yourself. Go talk to those cops down there. Don't take my word for it. Just go see for yourself. And they will talk to you. They will give you the nickel tour. They'll show you the whole place. If we were to put central booking down there, it would take massive infrastructure renovations to that basement. And so the problem is the costs that you might save in combining operations, you would probably take years to get those, recoup the construction and build out costs it would take that you'd have to do to fix that place. So with that, I'll close out my comments unless there's any questions of me.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. Future agenda items?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the well is now empty. We're ready for summer break. We will receive items from you all across the summer, as well as things that generate from the staff, and try to refill the bucket for the fall, but we really don't have anything pending right now.
Thank you.
Is there Councilmember Gagel?
And wanted to suggest pretrial detention as an item, and then maybe it would be good to get an update on homelessness in our justice system, and if there are innovations we can get to sort of support repeat customers, as well as update from the court system on the homeless court.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I would like to be given an update of MROPE and the whole holistic process change. I don't know what we're calling it. I know it's no longer MROPE, but that's how I've been trained. And I would like a whole update on how that's going to roll out with the human service side and all the elements that go along with it.
Okay.
And who's responsible for it.
All right.
Alrighty, that's it. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.